Hey everybody, Rob Orgel with BMG. In today's video, we're going to talk about cost-effective training. Now, a quick disclaimer is going to be that a qualified firearms instructor can really help you take your skills to the next level. Short of that, there's a lot you can do to maintain your skills. So while we talk about holster work, it's important to make sure that we're executing a proper holster technique that doesn't involve flagging ourselves or jeopardizing anyone's safety in the process. Next is that in-home disclaimer. I'm a big advocate of do not dry fire in your home. I'll come back and talk about that some more, but I would recommend that you not press any triggers in your home unless you absolutely have to for that defensive situation or that weapon disassembly, in which case you check and buddy verify that your weapon is safe before you press that trigger into a safe direction. A little bit about my background. I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps serving in Iraq and Afghanistan as an infantry rifleman. I later went on to become a combat instructor where I trained Marines all kinds of combat skills. When I left the Marine Corps after 10 years, I became a private military contractor, also there serving as an instructor. After 4 years serving that contract in Baghdad, Iraq, I left contracting, hung my holster for good, and since then have been doing 300 plus days a year on the range, educating civilians, law enforcement, and everyone who's up to become more proficient with their firearms. Now, let's dive into it. First is holster work. As I mentioned before, holster work needs to be a trained subject, not just taking the firearm out of the holster and putting it away. That causes a lot of problems and safety concerns. We need to keep in mind that when we take our gun out of the holster or place it back into the holster, that often we're actually pointing the gun at ourselves. So it's important to have a very safe and effective procedure for this technique. Also keep in mind that if you are drawing your firearm, it's because your life is imminently in danger and you need to protect yourself. So being proficient at this is the utmost. So how can we practice this? With an unloaded firearm and pointing in a direction that it is safe for the firearm to go off. This is where we can conduct our holster work. Now, clearing garment, getting a positive grip, coming out of the holster and sight alignment. I would say stop at sight alignment, then conduct your scans and reholster. I would say do not press that trigger. So there's a lot of good blue or red guns out there to train with. I really like using red guns. The reason is it keeps you safe. So if you're doing your holster work, you can switch from your actual firearm to a red gun, and this reduces a lot of potential problems. In addition to that, if anyone was to observe you training, they would see you handling what is obviously a training device, and it doesn't look like a black firearm as they walk by your kitchen window and decide something bad is happening. So I'm a big advocate of red guns. Of the red guns, I particularly like the ASP red guns. ASP is how to spell that. The reason I like the ASP red guns is they feel much more real, and most of all, they have sights. Whereas a lot of the other ones, they kind of cut the corner on the sights. These have actual sights on them, so you can align your front and rear sights to a target. And as I mentioned, that's where our training should stop, is on a sight alignment on a target. This is where I want to dive a little bit deeper into that. A lot of people believe that practicing their trigger work is an important part of their homework. I would say that is completely not true. Here's how I've tested and found that answer. Everyone who comes through my training, I'll ask them, do you dry fire? And if their head starts going north to south, I'll say, great, you'll be my demonstrator. And I will cycle their action and allow them to press the trigger on the range where their gun is allowed to go off. I'll have the whole class watch. And then I'll say, all right, the range going hot, eyes and ears. But everybody puts their ears on, I cycle his action one more time, and then I insert the magazine. There is no round in the chamber. He doesn't know that. He'll press the trigger and the gun drops, unlike the previous 3 rounds. And I'll say, what happened? And he'll always say, it didn't go off. I'll say, no, you anticipated. So all that dry fire practice, all those perfect presses don't amount to much on the range. So if you want to get good at shooting, practice by shooting. If you want to get good at your holster work, you absolutely can practice that in your home, having been safely trained. So holster work stops at sight alignment. Finger stays off the trigger, then scan and reholster. Let's honor those safety rules so that we don't end up with a hole in the wall or something worse. We don't want to lose our rights today so that we can practice. And again, the return on that investment, I believe, is relatively low. So don't press the trigger, but do practice your holster work. Do try on all the different garments that you might wear. And before you leave for work or whatever events you're doing that day, it's a good idea to practice if what you're wearing is foreign to you. This way you find any snags and you work through any problems so that in an emergency, you already have a neural pathway to your success. So holster work. Now, while we're on the range, you absolutely can do dry fire practice. If you're a dry fire type of person, this is your time. This is a safe place for your firearm to go off. Make sure we don our eye protection and ear protection, and then absolutely get in your dry fire practice if you believe it helps you. And there's a healthy argument that it does. Personally, I disagree, but the range is the safe place to do that, where you won't lose your rights or hurt anybody if you find out that you're wrong. So dry fire practice, including the draw, is a great idea. Once we get past that, live fire is the most important. So now that I'm into live fire, let's do a draw and let's fire one round. This is going to encompass a lot of things. So it's going to be the speed of my draw, the sight alignment, and a slow, steady press. Now, once I get that down to a controlled science, it's a good idea to put it to the shot timer, meaning get faster. As long as you're being safe, push the gas pedal. Don't violate any safety rules, don't take any risks. But do push the gas pedal, because what safety on the range means is don't have an accident. What safety in a gunfight means is don't die, because you're taking your gun out because someone is trying to stop you from breathing. This is a very different situation than what we're working on the range. On the range, it's all about that pretty piece of paper and giving yourself that nice ragged hole. You can make a ragged hole in the course of 1 hour and have gained 0 skills. It's important to simulate the event you're preparing for. And if that means bowling and knocking down pins, then go bowling and knock down pins. But practice bowling won't make you good, kind of like the dry fire thing. If the defensive emergency is what you're planning for, speed is one of the biggest pieces of that defensive emergency. We'll show you a few clips of the sub 1 second draw, and that's coming out of your holster and engaging as fast as you can. .83 again. .84. Now the priority here is keeping that draw and that shot inside of 1 second. The priority is not stacking bullets on top of bullets. In fact, you'll find an example where a bad grip takes place. Buttons pressed. .101, bad grip coming out. Now this is a very important part of training, is that we don't always get a perfect grip, we don't always clear our garment, things go wrong. And if we're preparing for an emergency, we have to know that things have gone wrong for me to need to defend myself. So continue the drill. Don't stop, don't reset, don't adjust and then try again. Finish the drill regardless of what happened. If your shirt gets snagged, if you have a bad grip, it matters much less than you think, as long as you trained your mind for that emergency. So finish the exercise at all costs. This way in your emergency, even if you're in a great deal of pain, you'll protect yourself and your family because it was part of your training. Next, let's take that same exercise and make it a little bit more elaborate. And how we're going to do that is have a 1 round in the chamber and an empty magazine. After our first shot, we'll have to conduct our emergency reload. This is where you're going to remove your old magazine, insert your new magazine, action forward, and re-engage. .59. The goal is to get 2 rounds into the chest region of your target as quickly as possible. Now again, speed takes the forefront. As long as you're hitting, accuracy isn't near as important as speed. Keep in mind that if you have 2 pieces of lead stacked on top of each other, that's not necessarily better than 2 pieces of lead spread out by a certain amount of distance if it happened in half the time. People who are trying to hurt you that don't have hot lead in them are probably going to continue to try to hurt you until they have hot lead in them. People's attitudes often change with the presence of a firearm or when hot lead enters their anatomy. So make it a point to make that happen as abruptly as possible to increase your chances of survivability. So train for speed, not just accuracy. Even if you have to degrade some accuracy for speed, I'll consider that a fair trade-off as long as you're still making hits. All right, now let's transition from pistol and into carbine while maintaining that budget. As we move to carbine, the cost of ammo can go up quite a bit. So I can see the value in wanting to keep your round count down and your return high. So a couple exercises I like doing is my cold first shots. What that means is I take my shot timer and I set it to random. I clip to my belt, hit the button, and it will go off somewhere between 3.5 and 5.5 seconds. As soon as I hear that beep, I want to come up, off safe, and place a good round into the chest region. Again, a lot like pistol. If you can get a round even into the abdomen, that's better than a target that has no impacts on him at all. And if you get a round into the abdomen on the way up, and say that took place at 0.3, That, in my opinion, is superior to having one round square in the heart at 1 second. Because if you're up against the person who's you with a .3 and you with a 1 second, it's kind of obvious who's going to win that fight. So it's a good idea to be the first hitter. It doesn't have to be a perfect hit, it just needs to be a hit. .44. .43. Didn't pick it up. .33. It's a good idea to consider that the one with hot lead in their body usually doesn't get to go home to their family. So be the first hitter. Now let's take that to the next step. Once we start getting our up drills quickly and we're hanging around the .3s and the .5s, wherever you find your happy spot, some guys just want to break into the ones, some guys will get into those .3s pretty quickly. This is where we need rapid sight alignment and good muscle memory with our body. The distance, of course, is up to you. Personally, I find these drills best at about 5 yards. This is that room clearing type situation where I need to be particularly fast. Next is going to be recoil management. So in this video, you'll see me move to the head and I'll place 2 rounds very rapidly into the circle on the head. This is to maintain sight alignment during fire. This is something called a hammer pair. And very often I find people talk to a hammer pair, but don't actually do a hammer pair. A hammer pair is when you align your body to the target and you fire 2 rounds so fast that you maybe don't even see your sights on the second round. Most people fire 1 round, they settle, absorb recoil, and then fire a second round. That is not the purpose of this exercise. This is about speed and recoil management. So how long it takes you to fire the first shot doesn't matter. It's how long it takes you between shots. This is called a split. You want to get that split down as low as possible. Once you start getting 1, good control, and 2, low splits. My splits, I believe in that video, are about a .16. That's a very fast rate of fire. Now let's combine it all together. I want you to move back to that chest size target. On a random start on your timer, come up, find your sight, take it off safe, press off 1 and then 2 immediately after. So now we're combining the up drill with the hammer pair. Once you start mastering that, move it up to 3 and then finally into 5-round exercises. The 5-round exercise simulates what's called an NSR, non-standard response. And you would say, well, why do I need to shoot 5 times? There's a lot of good scenarios where 5 rounds would be what I need to end this threat. 1 can be this person is on drugs. 2, they're wearing body armor. 3, they're extremely close and I don't have the time to assess between shots. And finally, they can just be a very big threat, like a bear. If a bear comes into my campsite, particularly a grizzly bear, he's not going to get 2 rounds. He's going to get 5 rounds, and then I'm going to assess. The assessment takes time. That's your mind asking a question. Is this still a threat to me? And this is where an NSR can answer that question before I start asking, by giving them 5 rounds. So now we've worked our way up with our up drills, our hammer pairs, we've got our splits down, our recoil management down, and now we can assess our 5-shot groups. Look for vertical patterns. If you see it raising to the left or raising to the right, it means that you're not absorbing recoil very well. And there are a lot of good techniques out there about how to become a more proficient shooter and additionally absorb recoil in a very good fashion to maintain your splits and accuracy. Anyways, this has been a few tips to train on a budget. Hopefully you can take that to your local range, have some fun, save some money, and become a better shooter along the way.